The prehistoric murder that changed everything. Hidden deep within the rugged Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan lies Shannidar Cave, an unassuming but extraordinary window into our prehistoric past. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists excavating this ancient shelter stumbled upon something truly chilling: the remains of a Neanderthal male, later named Shannidar III. But what made this discovery remarkable wasn't just the age of the bones, estimated at 50,000 years, or the location. It was a single deadly wound in his ribcage that would spark one of the most fascinating cold cases in archaeological history. This wasn't just another ancient skeleton. It was possible forensic evidence of the earliest known murder, and possibly a confrontation between two human species, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Could this be the first recorded act of interspecies violence? The discovery that sparked a mystery. In the 1950s, American archaeologist Ralph Seletsky led a groundbreaking excavation in Shannidar Cave. The site, perched high on Bradost Mountain with sweeping views of the Greater Zab River, had been largely untouched for thousands of years. Seletsky's team dug a trench over 14 meters deep, peeling back layers of time, from recent human occupation to the Middle Paleolithic. Among their most significant discoveries were the remains of several Neanderthals, buried within what became known as Layer D. On April 16, 1957, a Kurdish worker noticed bones protruding from the trench wall. These would become the famous Shannidar III. Unlike most of the other finds, which were sent to the Baghdad Museum, Shannidar III's bones were transported to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. This decision would prove critical. There, scientists studying the skeleton made a remarkable observation: a puncture wound in the left ninth rib. The cut showed signs of healing, meaning the Neanderthal had survived for several weeks before succumbing, likely to the injury itself. Who was Shannidar III? Shannidar III wasn't just a victim. He was a survivor. Analysis of his skeleton revealed that he was a mature adult male, likely between 40 and 50 years old, relatively elderly for a Neanderthal. He stood about 5 feet 6 inches, 1.69 meters, tall, and had the muscular build typical of his species, with strong bones and broad shoulders. However, his body also bore signs of tough life. He had degenerative joint disease, particularly in his right ankle, a result of an earlier injury that had healed but left him with chronic pain and restricted mobility. This reduced mobility may have made him more vulnerable during hunts or territorial disputes. Neanderthals were far from the brutish cavemen of old stereotypes. They were skilled toolmakers, crafting Mysterian stone tools, including leaf-shaped points likely used in hunting. Evidence from Shannidar suggests they processed animal hides and had complex behaviors. But despite these skills, Shannidar III's life ended violently and mysteriously. A forensic puzzle from the Ice Age. The wound in Shannidar III's rib was more than just a scar. It was a clue. A clean, narrow cut angled downward at about 45 degrees, with no signs of crushing or fracturing. This suggested the injury was made by a sharp weapon, not by blunt trauma or accident. In 2009, anthropologist Stephen Churchill and his team at Duke University undertook a unique experiment to solve the mystery. They replicated stone weapons from the Paleolithic era and tested them on pig carcasses, chosen because of their anatomical similarity to humans. They recreated two scenarios: high-energy impacts, like thrusting spears used in close-quarters Neanderthal hunting; low-energy projectile weapons, such as thrown spears, a technology associated more with early Homo sapiens. The results were startling. High-energy thrusts caused shattered bones and widespread damage. But Shannidar III's wound was clean and precise, more consistent with a projectile thrown from a distance. So who killed Shannidar III? This evidence narrowed down the list of suspects to 3 possibilities. An accident. Perhaps he fell onto a sharp object or was injured during a hunt. But the precision and angle of the wound make this explanation unlikely. Another Neanderthal. Internal conflict is plausible, as competition over food, mates, or territory may have led to violence. Neanderthals certainly had the strength to cause such injuries. A Homo sapiens, an early modern human, equipped with more advanced weaponry and projectile technology, entering Neanderthal lands around the time Shannidar III died. The third theory is the most compelling. Around 50,000 years ago, early humans began migrating out of Africa and into Western Asia and Europe, lands long occupied by Neanderthals. Homo sapiens had developed lighter, more aerodynamic spears, possibly used with otlotls, spear throwers, which allowed for more efficient hunting and warfare from a distance. The projectile that likely killed Shannidar III fits the technological profile of these new arrivals. And so, a troubling possibility arises. Was this an early act of interspecies conflict? The bigger picture, survival, competition, and contact. The story of Shannidar III isn't just about a single death. It may be a snapshot of a far larger drama playing out between two human species during a critical period in evolutionary history. As Homo sapiens spread across the globe, Neanderthals began to disappear, going extinct in most areas by 40,000 years ago. But the relationship between the two species wasn't purely hostile. Genetic evidence shows they interbred. Most people of Eurasian descent today carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Still, peaceful coexistence may have been fleeting. Modern humans had several advantages: more advanced tools and weapons, broader social networks, greater dietary diversity, possibly more complex symbolic thinking. Anthropologist Pat Shipman coined the term the invader's advantage to describe the edge Homo sapiens had over their cousins. Other potential cases of prehistoric violence have surfaced. For example, a Neanderthal from Saint-Césaire, France, had a healed skull fracture that may have come from combat. But the case of Shannidar III remains the clearest example of an individual killed in a way that directly implicates our ancestors. More than a fossil, a life and a legacy. What makes Shannidar III's story so powerful is how it humanizes both victim and attacker. He was not just a skeleton, but a man who lived, hunted, built tools, and struggled to survive in a challenging world. And whoever killed him, whether Neanderthal or Homo sapiens, did so not as a monster, but as another human shaped by the brutal realities of Ice Age life. His death reveals something essential about us. The same innovations that allowed Homo sapiens to dominate the planet, creativity, adaptability, and technology, have always been entwined with conflict. Even now, the mystery isn't closed. Since 2015, new excavations at Shannidar Cave, led by a team from the University of Cambridge, have uncovered more Neanderthal remains, including Shannidar Z in 2018, just meters from the famous flower burial site. With modern archaeological techniques, scientists continue to piece together the puzzle of our ancient relatives. And as they do, Shannidar III remains at the center of one of the most captivating stories in human history. A story of life, death, and the dawn of a new world. A murder that echoes across millennia. Though 50,000 years have passed since Shannidar III drew his final breath, his story still resonates. Why? Because it brings us face to face with the origins of human nature, not in abstract theories or genetic charts, but in one man's wound. A single rib, pierced and healing, holds within it a flash of prehistoric violence and survival, of contact and consequence. What happened in Shannidar Cave wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the possible first documented human conflict, a turning point where two intelligent species, both fully adapted to the same world, crossed paths. One would vanish from the fossil record. The other would eventually walk on the moon. This isn't to say Homo sapiens committed genocide. The truth is far more complex and messy. Climate shifts, disease, dwindling populations, resource competition, all likely played roles in the Neanderthals' decline. But Shannidar III shows us that violence may have been part of that story. Not the whole story, but a thread woven into the greater narrative of extinction and expansion. And still, even with his likely violent death, Shannidar 3 reminds us that Neanderthals were not so different from us. He lived with injury and hardship. He likely hunted with companions, perhaps had a family, used tools with skill, made choices under pressure. He was old enough to have seen seasons pass, to accumulate knowledge and habits, maybe even stories. His people buried their dead. Some of them may have cared for their injured. In those ways, they were deeply human. Technology, survival, and the human condition. Shannidar 3's case also highlights a deeper truth, that innovation and violence have often traveled together in human history. The projectile weapon that likely ended his life was a technological advancement, one that gave our ancestors a survival edge. It allowed us to hunt more efficiently and defend ourselves from afar, but also allowed us to kill more effectively. That edge may have tilted the scales between two species so closely matched in physical strength and intelligence. In a world of scarce food and constant danger, being able to kill from a distance may have meant the difference between life and extinction. Today, we often celebrate technology as progress, but Shannidar 3's rib forces us to ask, at what cost? What did we lose when one kind of human survived and the other vanished? What stories, languages, and ways of seeing the world died with the Neanderthals? A cold case still unfolding. Even now, this ancient mystery continues to evolve. The new excavations at Shannidar Cave, using 21st century tools like microstratigraphy, digital mapping, and chemical analysis, are revealing more about how Neanderthals lived and possibly how they died. These findings may offer context that could either support or complicate the theory that Shannidar 3 was murdered by a modern human. In 2018, the discovery of Shannidar Z, another adult Neanderthal skeleton, sparked fresh interest. This individual was found in what may be a purposeful burial site, close to where Shannidar 3 and others had been uncovered decades earlier. Could this mean Neanderthals practiced rituals, mourned their dead, and held symbolic beliefs? If so, it paints them in an even more human light, not as primitive creatures, but as fellow beings with inner lives. Why Shannidar 3 matters today. Ultimately, the story of Shannidar 3 is not just a tale of death in the distant past. It's a mirror, one that reflects both the brilliance and brutality of our species. His cracked rib speaks to innovation, but also aggression. His bones whisper of survival, but also loss. He challenges us to think beyond dates and timelines and instead feel the shared humanity stretching across time. When you look at Shannidar 3, you're not just seeing a fossil. You're looking at a chapter in our shared story, a story of contact, conflict, and the uncertain legacy of becoming the last human species left standing. So the next time you hold a tool, study a map, or consider what makes us human, remember the man in the cave. Remember the rib, the wound, the weapon. Remember Shannidar 3, because sometimes a single injury can change everything.